The Oklahoma City Thunder should not have let this happen, because now they've opened the door to something they might not be ready for. Behind yet another Nikola Jokic masterclass, and what Denver fans are already calling the flu arrow game from Jamal Murray, the Nuggets have now forced another Game 7. In this video, we're going to briefly break down what happened in Game 6, and then dive into everything you need to know heading into the do or die showdown back in Oklahoma City. After a heartbreaking loss in Game 5 on the road in Oklahoma City, a game where it really felt like Denver had it in the bag after taking an 8-point lead into the fourth quarter, the Nuggets came back home knowing that they had to respond. And boy, did they ever. With their season on the ropes, the former champs delivered a performance that quickly reminded everybody exactly why this team was once good enough to win it all. As always, Nikola Jokic was at the center of everything, putting together another absurd masterpiece. 29 points, 14 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 stocks, and doing it all on 64% shooting. Just another night for the big man. But he was not alone. Jamal Murray, battling through flu-like symptoms, produced a game for the ages, dropping 25 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. Denver's dynamic duo combined for 54 points, and it was the kind of all-around gutsy performance that makes you appreciate how much this team refuses to quit. But what made this win so impressive and potentially so meaningful going into Game 7 was that it wasn't just Jokic and Murray. The rest of the team showed up in a big, unexpected way. And that's exactly what Denver needs if they are going to continue this playoff push. Because two guys alone cannot win you a championship. Christian Braun was one of those guys, as he was everywhere in this game, doing all of the little things that can tilt the balance in a game without always showing up on the box score. But even the numbers told the story in this game. He had more points than Jalen Williams, more rebounds than Isaiah Hartenstein, more steals than Alex Caruso, and more threes made than Gilgeous-Alexander. That is a wild stat, perfectly showcasing just how much he meant to Denver in this win. Early on though, things didn't look good for the Nuggets. Oklahoma took a 12-point lead with just 2 minutes to go in the first half, appearing as if they were going to have a double-digit lead at halftime, with the game under control. But then the Nuggets flipped the switch. In just 120 seconds, everything changed. Denver went on a 15-3 run, and if it wasn't for a buzzer-beating Lou Dort corner 3, they would have tied the game going into halftime. That run changed everything. Even still, Oklahoma City came out of halftime and tried to snatch back momentum, and for a brief moment, it felt like they might. But then, just like in the first half, the game flipped again. Midway through the third, Shai had to sit down with foul trouble. The natural thought was Denver would take full control, but oddly enough, they didn't, despite the fact Oklahoma City's offense was falling apart without their MVP on the floor. As in this game, the non-SGA minutes were truly a catastrophe for the Thunder, but oddly enough, Denver didn't capitalize. Even though the Thunder weren't scoring, they weren't either. It was the kind of stretch where you needed someone, anyone to step up. Maybe Jokic. Maybe get into the two-man game with Murray and Jokic, trying to create some good looks. Or perhaps some post touches for Aaron Gordon, who was having a quiet game. No, Denver went to Julian Strawther. In what felt like a plot twist straight out of a sports movie, Strawther became the unexpected hero. I mean, I simply could not believe what I was watching, as just when it was looking like Denver was going to be one guy short again, just like what happened in Game 5 when Oklahoma City ran them down in the fourth quarter, Strawther, of all people, flipped the game. In the second half alone, he poured in 15 points on 50% shooting and drilled 3 out of his 4 looks from downtown. And it wasn't just the big-time shot making. It came when Denver needed it the most. And maybe most importantly, it allowed Nikola Jokic to get some much-needed rest. This was one of the quiet but crucial differences between this game and the collapse in Game 5. Jokic was able to sit to start the fourth, as Denver had built an 8-point lead. One of these stretches, though, can easily go sideways quickly, and usually as soon as it does, Jokic will get subbed back in. But not this time. First, Murray drills a huge 3, then Russell Westbrook comes flying in to clean up a Strawther missed layup, then Julian puts the ball on the floor and gets to the foul line. So by the time Jokic came back in. There was 7 minutes and 53 seconds to go, and Denver actually ballooned the lead out to 11. That kind of cushion doesn't just show up. It was earned, and that unit delivered, led by the most unlikely hero in Julian Strawther. If the Nuggets go on to win Game 7, we're probably not going to spend too much time remembering the Strawther game, which allowed Denver to give Jokic rest and then come out and close the game. But make no mistake, this was a moment that kept Denver's season alive. But even after Denver built what looked like a comfortable 16-point lead with just under 4 minutes to go, coming off yet another timely Strawther bomb, the game was actually far from over. Oklahoma City just kept pushing, refusing to let the season slip without a fight. They clawed their way back into striking distance, and for a brief moment, it felt like they actually had a chance to steal the game, just like they did in Game 5. But then came the moment that sucked the air out of their rally. A wide open, fast break dunk from Jalen Williams that he simply missed. This was one of those moments that didn't just cost 2 points. It deflated any belief that the comeback was still in the cards. And the thing is, that missed dunk was just the tip of the iceberg for Jada. It basically summed up his night, and honestly, his series, where he just has not been good enough offensively. This is the guy who's supposed to be the second leading scorer for this Thunder team, but he just finished a must-win game with just 6 points on 3 of 16 shooting. Yes, he did a lot of other things well, putting up 10 assists and 7 rebounds, and I'll be the first to say it, he played some elite defense tonight, including 3 steals and a block, but when you're getting up 16 field goal attempts and you're that inefficient, he wasn't just struggling to score, he was actively shooting them out of the game. Even worse, this has not been a once-off. It's been a pattern all series long. He's now had 4 genuinely horrendous shooting nights. 2 of 13, 5 of 14, 5 of 20, and now 3 of 16. This is not a slump. That is a problem. He struggled last season in the playoffs against the Dallas Mavericks as well, and I just don't see how the Oklahoma City Thunder expect to win a series against a team as experienced and composed as Denver are when their supposed second leading scorer is constantly giving them performances like this. Sure, Jalen made plays in other areas, and yeah, he's still a young player with a ton of upside. But in these moments, high stakes, elimination type games with a chance to close out a former champion to avoid a Game 7 against a team that is maybe the most experienced in those situations as anyone, your best players have to step up and deliver. And that is an ongoing issue for the Thunder, one I talked about extensively before the playoffs began, as they simply don't have a clear, reliable second scoring option. Coming into the postseason, it looked like it may have been a toss-up between J-Dub and Chet Holmgren, but with the way the team plays, where the ball goes, and who gets more shot attempts every night, it's pretty obvious that they view Williams as that guy. And yet, Chet was the one who had the better scoring night. Less usage than Williams, fewer plays ran for him, but he still gives them 19 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 stocks on 57% shooting. He was the only Thunder player who logged more than 15 minutes in the game to finish with a positive plus-minus of +3 in a game where they lost by 10. His impact was real, and while he wasn't dominant, he was efficient and effective, something Oklahoma City desperately needed more of. Meanwhile, SGA was brilliant again, 32 points on 68% shooting. That's as good as you can ask for, but even he could not carry them alone, especially after running into foul trouble. And that is the bigger point. You can't put it all on one guy, not in a game this important, not against a team like Denver who's been through the wars and know exactly what it takes to close out a game, and because of the loss, they are now going to have to go up against the Denver Nuggets team who have now played in 7 Game 7s already, perhaps the most experience in this situation of any team going right now. This felt like a game the Thunder absolutely needed to win. It was clear from the opening tip that Denver just wanted it more. The urgency, the edge, and the desperation was all on the Nuggets side, and that is where the danger lies in a Game 6 when when you're up 3-2. It can feel like you've got a cushion, especially if you're the road team in that situation, having the idea of a Game 7 back in your own building. But that is the trap, especially for a young team like OKC with limited playoff experience, as it can be hard to match the energy level of a battle-tested group like Denver, who absolutely know that if they lose tonight, the season's over. Now, to be clear, I don't think it's over for OKC. The Thunder still have that Game 7 in their own building where I do believe they can win. But man, if they do fall short, and if Denver comes into their building and wins Game 7 on the road, we might look back at Game 6 as the one they simply couldn't afford to lose. And now all roads lead to Game 7. A battle that, in all honesty, might end up being the game that decides the NBA champion this season, given the fact that the East is a bit weak. In my eyes, the Thunder and the Nuggets are the two best teams left standing in the playoffs. They've looked the most complete, the most dangerous, and the most capable of adjusting under pressure. The NBA Finals may technically be scheduled in June, but this year they might be happening in May, because no matter which of these teams survives this war, there'll be a good chance that we could see them in the finals in June, because they are both truly that good. Then, with how much weaker the Eastern Conference has felt this postseason due to injuries and upsets, it really does feel like the West holds the crown between Denver, Oklahoma City, and Minnesota. What makes this even more special is the showdown at the heart of it all, a generational Game 7 featuring two MVP finalists in Nikola Jokic and Gilgeous-Alexander. You couldn't ask for a better narrative, because this season the MVP race has been so much closer than I think it's ever been in the history of the league. And it's so intriguing because they represent two totally different play styles. You've got the former 3-time MVP and champion in Nikola Jokic versus the new kid on the block in Gilgeous-Alexander, who just put together one of the best scoring seasons of all time. And for all of this to potentially be coming to a head in a Game 7, which, as I stated before, I believe could decide the championship, this is going to be cinema. I really hope that the NBA has sense enough to announce the MVP before tip-off. Imagine the atmosphere. Imagine the feel that it could give one of these stars right before the biggest game of their season. It could set the stage for one of the best games of basketball the league has ever seen. Sadly, I feel like they're not going to do it, given the fact that the league is a little soft with these kinds of things. But still, regardless on whether or not there's an MVP trophy waiting courtside, the stakes still couldn't be higher. This is going to be a Game 7 that lives on in our memory. So now let's take a look at what each team will need to do to take that final step into the Western Conference Finals. Let's start with Oklahoma City, because while they've shown flashes of brilliance throughout the postseason, their offensive limitations have become impossible to ignore. We've seen over the course of this entire playoff run that this team is built on defense, hustle, and youth, but they have not been able to consistently manufacture high-quality offense in their half court. The lack of a true secondary scorer behind Gilgeous-Alexander has become more and more glaring, and the reality is they've been winning games largely by overwhelming teams on the defensive end. When they're at their best, they'll swarm you, pressure the ball, jump into passing lanes, and then force turnovers that lead to easier looks in transition. That chaos fuels their offense and makes them look like a more efficient offensive system than they actually are. The numbers from the regular season, like finishing 3rd in the league for offensive rating, are honestly misleading. They benefited from playing games where the intensity was lower while keeping their defensive intensity really high, and in a one-game matchup where you don't really game plan that hard for an opposing team in the regular season, it can and did catch teams off guard. But playoff basketball is a different beast. Teams lock in, they take care of the ball, they game plan against you, and suddenly those easier transition looks become a lot harder to come by. So that is why so much pressure is put on half-court offense, and your ability to hit tough shots, run plays, and sets with precision, and those are the areas that OKC has struggled with offensively. Denver, to their credit, came into the series with a known weakness, as they had had been a below average turnover team in the regular season, and it seems like a potential pressure point that the Thunder could look to exploit. And while OKC has still been able to generate solid points off turnovers every game, Denver has made a clear intentional effort to tighten things up. Outside of a couple of wild moments, mainly from Russell Westbrook, they've taken care of the ball a lot better than in the regular season. But the real equalizer, or maybe more accurately, the dominant force in the series has been the rebounding. That is the area that the Thunder simply haven't been able to keep up with. Night after night, they're getting crushed on the glass. In Game 6 alone, they were out-rebounded 52-40, and the Nuggets turned 11 offensive rebounds into a ludicrous 23 second chance points. That is the kind of stat that breaks you. Even if the Thunder are continuing to force turnovers and create points off of them, the part of their game that does make them dangerous offensively, it almost doesn't matter if the other team is constantly getting extra possessions and cashing in, as at that point it does put you on a level playing field. And shot for shot, play for play, the Thunder simply can't keep up with Denver's offense. And actually, it isn't even like that either, because Denver has also been turning some turnovers into points as well, turning what should have been an advantage for the Thunder into an advantage for Denver. In Game 6, they actually matched Oklahoma City's 17 points off turnovers with 17 of their own. These are the battles of the margins: turnovers, rebounding, and second chance points, as these are where series are often decided. And in Denver's wins, they are dominating the margins across the board. When the Nuggets lock in defensively, crash the boards, and keep their own turnovers relatively low, OKC simply doesn't have the offensive firepower to go shot for shot with the Nuggets. So going into Game 7, job number 1 for Oklahoma City is to be smart with the basketball. Every possession is going to matter, especially in a game like this, and for a team as young as they are. So playing with poise and intention under the brightest lights is going to be a massive challenge. It can't be all on Gilgeous-Alexander's shoulders. They will need at least someone to step up and have a quality offensive game themselves. And that brings us right back to Jalen Williams. Despite a rough series, the Thunder will need him to be at his all-star level, playing like the guy they relied upon all season long. If he can give them 20 points on even just slightly effective shooting, that would go a long way. I think he just needs to slow down and look to take that mid-range shot in the middle of the Nuggets zone, or to attack Jokic in a drop coverage, instead of trying to go through him and finish at the rack every time. Because the truth is, he has space to get to the mid-range jumper, and he's just playing too out of control. What he simply cannot do is take 16 shots again and only make 3 of them. That is the kind of thing that buries your team in a Game 7. The first few minutes of the game are going to be absolutely essential for the Thunder. If OKC can come out flying, potentially catching the Nuggets off guard, turning them over a few times for some dunks or threes in transition to get their home crowd buzzing, they could potentially build a good enough first half lead that gives them a cushion to hold on to avoid clutch time. But the fear, and it's a real one, is that Denver comes out calm, confident, and surgical. And if they're smart with the ball, continue to dominate the glass, and execute like the veteran, championship-tested team that they are, then Oklahoma City are in serious trouble, especially considering the fact that the Thunder are playing 2 7-footers in their starting 5 and are still losing the rebounding battle, as it would be a long night if Denver asserts themselves early. And that brings us to what the Nuggets will need to do. Everything I just mentioned about Oklahoma City applies here as well, just in reverse, with a few extra layers added on. The number one key for Denver heading into Game 7 is to stay disciplined. You cannot allow this young Thunder team to gain confidence early in the game with some sloppy passes or poor shot selection. The Nuggets need to walk into that building with a mentality to put the foot on the throat right from the opening tip, because if you give OKC even a sliver of hope, if you let them string together a couple of of quick transition buckets, getting the crowd behind them, then it is game on, and you're suddenly trying to survive in a hostile environment which thrives on chaos. Of course, for the Nuggets, it all starts with Nikola Jokic. That goes without saying. But it's worth noting that in this series, he's had an inconsistent stretch that we rarely see from him. After dominating in Game 1 and then delivering again in Games 5 and 6, there was a clear drop-off in his performance through Games 2 to 4. During that stretch, he put up just 18.5 points per game on an ugly 36% effective field goal shooting. Numbers that are well below what we've come to expect from the reigning MVP. If Denver wants to win this Game 7, they absolutely can't afford Jokic to revert back to that version. He needs to show up with the full bag. The passing, the post work, the control, and the efficiency. They will need all of it, because if he lays an egg, it's hard to see the Nuggets having any chance to win the game. But even with Jokic playing at his best, this isn't a one-man job. Denver needs at least 2, preferably maybe 3 or 4 guys to step up to help shoulder the offensive burden. In Game 6, that came in the form of Jamal Murray, Christian Brown, and Julian Strawther, all of whom had big moments. But noticeably, Aaron Gordon had a very quiet night. He finished with just 5 points on 28% shooting, and even more concerning was how he appeared to tweak his hamstring late in the game. If he's not 100%, or worst case scenario, can't go at all, Denver is going to need somebody to step up and fill that void. That is where, in my opinion, all the eyes shift to Michael Porter Jr. Now, we know he's dealing with the shoulder injury. That has been clear, as he's barely even able to put both arms straight up. But even with that in mind, his performance in the series has been frustratingly up and down, and mainly down if we're being honest. It feels like a flip of a coin with MPJ. In Game 3, he had 21 points, but then out of the 4 games surrounding it, he combined for just 15 points. That is not good enough, especially from a guy who's worth $36 million this year. His role is simple: hit open shots, especially threes, and be a real floor spacer. To his credit, Oklahoma City are still treating him like he's a lethal shooter, and that factor alone has been really important for Denver to continue to space the floor, especially considering you've got guys like Westbrook, Payton, and Brown who simply haven't been consistent enough from deep for Oklahoma City to really close out to them hard and not completely sag off of them. But at some point, the shots need to start falling. If he can come back and knock down even just 1 or 2 threes in the Game 7, that alone could be a swing factor. Of course, offense is only half of the equation. Denver, as a team, will also need to be locked in defensively. There were way too many stretches, especially early in the game, where the Nuggets defense completely broke down and gave the Thunder wide open looks to start Game 6. That simply cannot happen again in Game 7, because when you're playing a young, energetic team on their home floor in a do-or-die situation, you simply can't afford to give them easy buckets. The Nuggets need to be locked in, communicate on every switch, and force OKC to grind it out for every point, trying to really put on full display how bad they've been in the half court, making everything incredibly difficult to come by. The goal has to be to impose your will defensively and make it clear from the jump that tonight nothing is going to come easy. So ultimately, I've got a feeling that Denver's experience, even on the road, in the middle of what's going to be a storm, might just be good enough to get them across the line. But what do you guys think? I've got Denver, but who do you have winning Game 7? Let me know in the comments below.